Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of April. So I like to split up my wrap-ups into two distinct sections. I talk about all my statistics for the month, and then I go very in-depth into what I thought about each specific book. So we'll start with the statistics right now. Over the course of the entire month, I read close to 1,700 pages. This is just around 53 pages a day, so I am a little bit lower than my goal, which is 60 pages a day, but I am not concerned yet because, as I have been saying the last few months, the first 2 months of the year I did average a lot over 60 pages a day, and the last 2 months I've been averaging less than. But with that, I was preparing for a wedding and getting everything ready, and I knew that like March and April were going to be less. I did do a lot more audiobook listening to this month. I read about 67 hours. It's hard to be specific with that because I do listen on different speeds, and that does give me about 2.2 hours a day that I have listened. So I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the highest average daily that I've listened to. So I'm not even like mad that my page count is down because I'm clearly reading. I am just choosing to read in a different format. I had 1 star, 4 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 4 4 stars, and 2 5-star reads this month. I read 13 books this month, which is my highest that I have read in a whole entire month in this year. So I'm doing decently well. I'm staying right between 10 and 15 books a month, which is really what my sweet spot is. I paused 3 books, one of which is the Mime Order, and I'm really conflicted about if it's a pause or if it's a DNF, but I am just kind of letting it sit for a little bit to see how I feel about it as I move on. And then I only DNF'd 1 book this month, which made me feel really good because I normally DNF like a lot of books, and I know I'm trying this year to DNF when I'm feeling like it, but I also, for whatever reason, seem to be pushing myself to not DNF as much. That one DNF was A Magic Steeped in Poison. I didn't get to talk about it because it wasn't for Magical Readathon this month, but I will have a video at the end of the year talking about all the books that I DNF'd, and really briefly I can wrap up that I didn't like that it read very juvenile to me. The magic really wasn't prevalent in the story and everything felt extremely convenient, and I wasn't a huge fan of the writing because it felt convenient and juvenile. My average rating was a 3.2, which is actually kind of funny because when I was doing the math to get these numbers, I was like, oh, 3.2, that's the highest I've had this year. It's the lowest I've had this year. I have no clue what I've been rating books this whole entire year. I am very confused and don't know what I'm talking about, apparently. When it came to the genre of books I'm reading, though, this month was divided up way more than it's ever divided up. Normally I have about 5 genres that I'm reading throughout. This time, as you can see, it's like everything, and I have read 3 fantasies and then 3 mysteries, and then all of the other genres I have read exactly 1 book of. And so those other genres are horror, magical realism, sci-fi, fantasy romance, dystopian, an anthology, and a thriller. Just kind of weird for me, and also I think this is my first anthology I've read ever since I've been on my booktube channel. I'm not a fan of them. I read it for Magical Readathon. We'll talk about it when we get to it. I hauled 7 books this month, and out of those 7 that I hauled, I read 0 of them. To be fair, I can't remember exactly how many off the top of my head, but we'll get to it in the next page of statistics. Almost all of them were pre-orders. I think only 2 or 3 of them were not pre-orders, and those 2 or 3 I literally bought all of them in the last week of the month, so I didn't have much time to read the books that I hauled. I've started to notice a pattern, which is I don't buy any books for the first 75% of the month, and then there's something about that last little bit of the month that makes me want to buy books. So if I can ever figure out what that is, I can definitely like nip it in the bud, I'm hoping, because like I have plenty of books here that I am obsessed with and I want to read. Now that at least I can acknowledge like when I'm buying books and that it's all at a specific time, maybe I'll be able to figure out exactly what's going on. For my statistics of where my books are in my life, I came into the month owning 53 books on my physical and audiobook TBR, and I am leaving the month with only 46. I'm really hoping I can get that number below 40 this next month. We'll see. It was a lot closer before that last week when I hauled a bunch of things. So hopefully I can do it. 6 books shouldn't be too hard. I came into the month with 11 arcs, and I did accomplish reading a few arcs. We'll talk about that on the next slide. But I left the month with 12 arcs because I got accepted for a couple. So that kind of messed up my stats a little bit. And I don't count arcs towards hauled books, just in case you're wondering. I had pre-ordered 2 at the beginning of the month, and by the end of the month I had 6 books on my pre-order shelf, although I believe 3 of those are going to come off in the month of May, so that will go down again. There was like a giant sale at Barnes & Noble where like I could get hardbacks that I knew I was going to be buying in May for less than what they were going to be then, so it just made sense for me to be buying them now anyways. I came into the month with 3 books on my paused shelf, and I'm leaving with 6. I'm not a huge fan of that number, and I think over the course of the next 2 months I am really going to try and work on that and get that back down. I don't like books sitting on my paused shelf for more than a couple of months, and some of them have been on there since the beginning of this year, so I'd really like to make the decision if I am actually going to read them, if I'd like to leave them on pause, or if I'm going to DNF them sometime soon. And then I came into the month, I was currently reading 2 books. Leaving, I am only currently reading 1, which is very unusual for me, and it really only relates to the fact that I was in the wedding this weekend and I like didn't have time to start an audiobook. So my current physical read is the Atlas 6, and that's all I'm working through right now. For age demographic, 9 of the books I read were adult, 1 of them was new adult, and 3 of them were young adult. 0 of them were middle grade. That's absolutely nothing strange though at all. And out of where I read these books from, 20% of them were arcs, so that number is actually 3 arcs that I read. 26.7 of them were from my own shelf, and 53.3 of them were from my library. There was a little bit of crossover between library and owned because some of the books I owned the physical copy and then I listened to the audiobook. So that also will kind of affect the next statistics that we're going to be talking about, which is how I read them. 21% of them were ebooks, which is 3 books, and that's a lot higher than normal. I normally don't read ebooks. I was really attempting to get through some arcs, which all 3 of those ebooks were arcs. No, that's a lie. That's a lie. One of the ebooks was not, because one of my arcs was an audiobook. That's correct. So then I read 2 physical books and I listened to 9 audiobooks. So that is it on my statistics. I like to keep these all on track and everything. And if you are really into my statistics and you like seeing all of this like information, I will be having a video very shortly on my channel talking about not only how I get these statistics and how I make these charts for myself every single month, but what I track throughout the month so that I can get these numbers. Basically, I'm going to be very shortly showing you how I track my reading. So now that we've done that, let's talk about the 13 books that I read this month. I did vlog for Magical Readathon, so anything for Magical Readathon I talked in depth in those videos about. So I will be saying some things here, but I will probably not say as much because I have 13 books to get through, and I'll direct you to those 2 videos because there's only 2 of them. First up, I read The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This is my first Lisa Jewell book, and to be fair, I started it in March and I finished it on April 1st, so it like almost shouldn't even count towards this month, but I count it towards whichever month I finished the book in. I ended up like really not liking this book like at all. I think Lisa Jewell just might be kind of like divisive. Like, I don't think that's the right word, but like some people either really like her or some people like don't like her at all. And I also think that from book to book it kind of changes from what I've learned. So I think I'm going to be giving like maybe one of her other books a shot at some point, but this one like really didn't do it for me. So it's going to be a little bit before I give another one of her books a chance. The Family Upstairs is about this woman who, when she turns 25, inherits this house, and she wants to find out the whole entire backstory because when she was very, very little, like 1 year old, was found in the house and everyone else who lived in the house was murdered, and she, as a baby, was the only one there, and she wants to figure out the story of this like cult presence that was living in the house and like taking things over. And we're also following, I believe it's only one other POV, or is it 2 other POVs, seem to have some connection to the baby and the house, and it's just about bringing all the stories together, and you're finding out about the past and you're finding out about the present as the girl is like figuring out about her life. That's right, it is 3 POVs because the 3rd POV is this young boy who grew up in the house, and it's about him like growing up in the house right before the baby is born, the baby who we are following as an adult woman. I had quite a few issues with this book, but I think that I'm starting to realize that maybe like cult books aren't for me. We're gonna be talking about another one right after this, but I also rated that one kind of low, and then I rated this one kind of low, and then I DNF'd the book by Nick Cutter, Little Heaven, which is also a cult book, and you know, that's only 3 books, so I can't like be 100% positive, but I thought I liked cult books up until now, so I'm a little concerned that I don't actually like them. But if you have any really good recommendations for a cult book, maybe suggest it down below, because I'd like to read one that's considered really good to know whether or not I actually like them or not. Some of my issues with the book, I didn't like where the story went, specifically with like the little boy as he grew up. It felt like they villainized him in such a way that I wasn't a fan of, and I understand that you can villainize anyone and it's acceptable, whatever. You don't have to. I'm trying to talk about this without spoiling information. It just felt a little weird. And then also I felt like I was bored through most of the book, and I feel like a book about this family who is like taking over this other family's life and moving in with them and taking over this house and stealing from them, treating everyone like they're in a cult, should not be boring. So I ended up rating this book a 2-star. Up next, I read Pieces of Her by Karen Slaughter, which also has a large cult presence to it, but the story is about this mom and daughter. The daughter moved back home. She's an adult woman. She was not doing well though on her own, but she moved back home to help take care of her mom because her mom was diagnosed, I want to say it was with cancer. It's been a little bit, so I don't totally remember, but it was with a terminal illness. And as she moves home, they go out for like a lunch together one day, and while they're at this lunch, this man attacks and shoots up the restaurant that they are in, killing people right in front of them, and her mom seems to be this person that she didn't expect her to be and can somehow like fight back against this man. And then once you have that scene happen, you have the daughter having to go on the run for certain reasons, and then you're getting flashbacks to the mom's early adulthood life and kind of how she grew into this woman who can do these things. I was really interested up until we started getting the flashbacks, and every single time we were getting the flashbacks, I was absolutely hating them, and I didn't care about the mom's backstory, which is like so bizarre to me because the mom was so much more interesting than the daughter to me, and I really like enjoyed the mom's story and kind of couldn't stand Andy's story, but I was like interested in how Andy's story was written, and I was way more interested in the things that were happening there. So it was a really bizarre, really weird book, and there is like a large cult thing that kind of takes over near the end, but I won't spoil what it is. But I wasn't in love with this one, and that seems really odd to me because I really, really enjoy Karen Slaughter as a writer, and I'm starting to think that maybe I only like her standalone books and I don't like her series, which is sad because I've officially read all of her standalones. So I guess I'm just gonna have to go and start over and read Pretty Girls again, which is fine by me. I'm gonna read that book a couple hundred times for sure. But I did end up rating Pieces of Her 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. Up next, I read A Lesson in Vengeance, which was my least favorite book of the month. And I'm really disappointed in this one because this was a book that I had on my 5-star predictions, and this is my 1-star for the month. I physically hated this book. It's hard for me to completely describe why I hated this book because the book was very pretentious, and it was obviously trying to be pretentious. The characters were unlikable, and it was obvious that the characters were supposed to be unlikable. I don't think I was actually supposed to cheer for anyone. I don't think I was supposed to agree with anyone. I don't think that I was supposed to be like into what they were doing, but it was done in such a way that I couldn't even enjoy hating it or enjoy disliking it. Like a lot of times I can enjoy how well an author writes a insufferable character, and I can appreciate the author's skill. Even though I'm not liking the character or not liking what they're doing, I can enjoy the book because I see that the author accomplished what they were trying to do. So even though the author here accomplished what she was trying to do in getting me to hate the characters and not agree with what they're doing, it was done in such a way that I felt like it wasn't the emotion I was trying to get. Like I was getting infuriated because it wasn't effectively done. It's really hard for me to explain. Like the characters were insufferable, but they weren't insufferable intentionally. But I do believe that the author intentionally was trying to make them insufferable, but it wasn't insufferable in a way that I could enjoy it because it felt like it wasn't done right. That's so confusing. I'm so sorry that I can't explain this book completely well, but I hated it, and it made me really hate dark academia for a solid week. I was like, damn, maybe I'm never gonna pick up a dark academia ever again because this book sucked. There were many times that I wanted to DNF this book, and the only thing that kept me going, to be completely honest, is it was so short, and I had the audiobook, and I kind of just accidentally left it on for a few hours while I was doing stuff, so I was listening to it passively, so I knew what was going on, but I wasn't having to forcefully read the book. And then I realized that there was only an hour left, so at that point I was like, well, we might as well just finish this. So I did rate it a 1.5. I'm on the fence about whether or not I'm going to go back and rate it a 1 star because I genuinely didn't enjoy it, and I genuinely don't think the author was as effective as she was trying to be with the story. At this point in the month, I was really getting frustrated that I was rating everything really poorly. I had noticed that I had rated the last 5 books under 2 stars. I had rated the Karen Slaughter book a 3 star, but it was Karen Slaughter, so I wanted it to be a 5 star. And then before then, even there was a couple of books that were a 4 star, but they were all surrounded by 2 stars. Basically what I'm saying is I got really annoyed because I was realizing that almost everything I had read in the last month was really lowly rated. I was talking to a friend about it. I was getting really frustrated with it, and just on a whim, I came into my office here where my library is, and I was looking through my books, and I knew I had been telling myself for a while now that I wanted to pick up and reread The Host, because I haven't read it since, I believe it was 2013, I want to say. And so I flipped it open and I read the first few pages, and I didn't set it down. And I finished it, and it was so absolutely good. I did read this for Magical Readathon. I ended up switching it with a different book that I did end up finishing in the long run, but I enjoyed this, so I wanted to have that count towards Magical Readathon instead of the other book, which I didn't enjoy. The Host is a book by Stephenie Meyer. She wrote Twilight, but I haven't read Twilight, and I highly recommend The Host. First off, I'm going to say I rated this 5 out of 5 stars both times I read it. Back in 2013 and in 2022, and I plan on rereading this again. If you go and watch the Magical Readathon vlog, you can watch me cry multiple times while reading this book. I highly recommend this book. I normally don't put rereads into my favorites of the year list. I'm putting this into my favorites of the year list. This book was phenomenal, well written, well developed. The characters were so good. The issues were so good. It was just a really, really phenomenal book. There were some slight issues I had with some very small things at the ending, but overall I absolutely loved it, and I am so glad that I chose to pick it up because it really felt like I needed a win in that moment, and that's exactly what this is. So this book is about this species of aliens who have taken over Earth almost completely, and they are parasites, and they have taken over human bodies and live as if they are human, but in a more peaceful manner. And they want to wipe out the rest of humans because they believe that humans are bad and humans are the issue. Humans cause death and murder and stealing and crime and all of the bad things. And these people, these souls is what they call themselves, do not have crime, do not have hatred, do not have anger. And so they are good. And even though they're taking over people's lives and basically erasing consciousness, they are saving the earth and saving the planet and making it a peaceful and wonderful place to live. Our main character, Wanderer, is put into the body of this rebel girl who was trying to escape these souls, and they put her into this body to try to get the information about where some of the last rebels are hiding out. When Wanderer wakes up in the body, Melanie, the consciousness who owns the body, is not completely gone, and Wanderer can't seem to get rid of her. And so it's about the two of them becoming friends and having to work together, and Melanie is basically trying to convince Wanderer, because Wanderer is starting to access Melanie's memories, that she shouldn't turn in the humans because Melanie's brother and boyfriend are with the humans. And she basically, because it's one body, allows Wanderer to fall in love with them. And it's such an interesting concept and take and idea, and I just really, really, really enjoyed it. I, once again, highly recommend. I mean, I feel like if you haven't read this book at this point, like, you're probably not going to, but if you haven't and you're listening to this review, like, absolutely, I recommend it. This is such an enjoyable book. I wish I could reread it right now, to be completely honest. And then after that, I was feeling so good, and I picked up another book, and the next book was also a 5-star. So I read my only 2 5-stars back to back this month, and the second one was Winter's Orbit. So I will say, getting into this book, I had a little bit of a hard time with the first few chapters, but after I got into the book and was like starting to feel it and starting to vibe with it, I loved it. I loved it so much. So we are following 2 main characters, Kiem and Jinan, and they are forced into an arranged marriage for a political alliance. Now, Jinan was married to someone in the, so they're from different backgrounds. Kiem is from like this royal family who basically owns all of the galaxy, and Jinan is from this poor outer planet who was kind of recently taken over. And so Jinan was previously married to this man who was in the royal family to bridge an alliance, and Tom died, and so he is now married off to another royal member to keep the alliance going. And once the 2 men get married to each other, they believe that Tom's death might not have been an accident, and so they start to investigate it, and it's the story of them basically both falling in love with each other. I will say that a lot of this book hinges on the miscommunication trope, but I felt so into it the entire time. They are so cute and so precious. You do get both POVs, which is really, really great. So you get to see both of them kind of falling for the other person, but wanting to save the other person's feelings and really caring and thinking about the other person. It was just done really well. I was smiling through almost all of the book. It was a really dumb smile, let's be real, and I couldn't put it down. I felt so hooked. This author is writing another book that's supposed to come out at the end of this year, and I'm so ready for it. It sounds, I'm not gonna lie, it sounds a little bit better than this one, and I like can't stop thinking about the plot. If you want to know the plot is on Goodreads, and you can go like read it right now. But this one was a 5 out of 5. I highly recommend this one. This one got my honorable mention for the month, and it will be on my favorites of the year list. Guys, if you take anything away from this video, go read these 2 books. They're both sci-fi. This is dystopian. This is hard space opera. This is very heterosexual. Not so much whitewashing. The movie whitewashes it a lot. This is very gay. Very much has POC representation, and is just like a really enjoyable read. Up next, I read The Dragon Reborn, which is the 3rd book in the Wheel of Time, and I didn't like this one as much as the first 2. So the first 2, I rated 4 stars both. I will say that the second one was closer to a 3.5, but I just rounded up. And this one I rated a 2.5, and it simply is because the book wasn't good, but the book wasn't bad. It was absolutely average. It felt like most of this book was filler information, and I'm kind of disappointed in that, because in this book I was way more interested in the characters that we were following here. For the first time, we're not following Rand heavily. We're following Matt and some of the beautiful women. I was just so disappointed with how lacking in plot this book was. For it being this thick, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. Matt delivered a letter, and that was it. That was the entire plot of this book. And it wasn't even like him journeying to deliver the letter was like adventurous or anything. He doesn't even start delivering the letter, I don't think, until like 30 or 40% through the book. If Robert Jordan is going to be added to a list of authors I really enjoy and really recommend to people, he's gonna have to stop info dumping, and he's gonna have to stop describing every single city that everyone enters for more than 5 pages. I'm just getting kind of sick and tired of having so much information thrown at me, and I know that there's 14 books, so I'm hoping some of it comes back later and is important, but I absolutely like can't hold any more information about this world in my head. I genuinely like our characters, but we don't spend really any time with them. Like, most of the book is just kind of either talking about them or talking about like where they're at, specifically location. There's just a lot of description of location. And so I am going to be reading the next one this month, so I'm hoping I'll be able to make a decision after that one. I mean, I'm going to continue on. I am, but I'm hoping that the next one will help me, it's not over here, will help me make a decision about like whether or not I'm in love with this series or not. Up next, I read The Drowned Woods, which I did read for Magical Readathon, and it is an arc, and it is coming out in August. And I will say I really enjoyed it. I rated it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It lost me a little bit at the end. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, guys. I went on and on and on in the Magical Readathon video where I read this book, talking about how much it reminded me of Six of Crows. So this book has elemental magic. It also has death magic. It has a character who is hired to go on a heist. Basically, they're not stealing something, they're destroying something, but they're having to break into like a very magically warded area to stop something, to break something from it being used. And it's a band of characters who have lots of different representation. Our main character is bisexual, crazy backstories. It was a really genuinely good book. The main reason why I didn't rate it 5 stars, like I said, is something to do at the end, so I will not be spoiling it, but it has to do with something that happens during the heist that just kind of disappointed me and made me feel like the heist wasn't like as well thought out by the author as I would have liked. There is an animal companion in this book, and it is a corgi. There are fae in this book, and they do like give magic as a gift. They're not a huge part of the story, but they do add like a nice little magical element. And then there are these like little fairy tales throughout, but the fairy tales are like our main character's backstories, but they're told in a cute, fun fairy tale way. So the writing was really good, and I really enjoyed what she did with it and how she told the story. I'd say that the age demographic is probably similar to an age demographic of Six of Crows. So you could read it pretty young teenage years up until like late teenage years and still enjoy it. I think I would recommend people to order it and read it when it comes out in August. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. So up next, I read New Suns, and I will link you to my Goodreads down below. And in my Goodreads, you can go and see my specific rating for every single short story in this, because this is a short story collection. It's written by all authors of color, and what really drew me to this specific short story collection is it was not focusing on just one type of author of color, but I found there to be Black and Caribbean representation and Latin American representation and Native American and Indigenous voice representation and Eastern and Southern Asian representation. And I really liked that it like went out and it worked on trying to, and by it I mean the editor, like tried to collect stories from as many different people as possible. And there wasn't just like one from each of those. There were multiple stories from different people in different groups, and I really enjoyed the thought that was put into this collection. But I felt like the stories were a little bit disjointed. As someone who already doesn't like short stories, I was going into this like wanting to learn more about these cultures and how they tell stories, and I did get that, but I felt like I wasn't having a connection as to why these stories would have been put together. They were described to me as going to be speculative fiction, horror, sci-fi, and fantasy stories about minorities and the trauma they could have gone through in the past, present, and future. I felt like a couple of those stories definitely I could see exactly what it was trying to do and how it connected to that vision. But as the stories went on, I felt like they were getting farther and farther away from that vision. I really liked some of the stories and I really disliked other ones. That kind of came down to writing style, to be completely honest. But what I did enjoy is that I got to sample a lot of authors who have full-length novels, which I enjoy full-length novels, and I enjoy fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. So for the ones that I did enjoy or I liked the writing style, I definitely will be continuing to find other things by these authors. And so it was like I got a little snippet of finding something where I could figure out what I liked. Some of the authors I had previously read before, so I already was familiar with their writing style and how they did things, but there were a couple I found in here that I definitely will be checking out other things in the future by them. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this anthology because I don't read anthologies. I don't have anything to compare this to. Like, this is quite literally, I think, the only one I've read. If I've read others, it's been less than 3. So I like have nothing to compare this to. So I don't know if it's good or bad compared to other anthologies. And I am white, so I can't speak to the own voices representation or how well it did with that. I thought they did a good job, but my opinion really doesn't matter when it comes to this. So I think that if you're looking for like a sampling of some authors of color, there's queer rep and there's other representation in here as well, but all of the authors are authors of color. This would be a great way to sample out some different writing and to see maybe if you can find a new author that you really like and to see if maybe short stories are for you. But overall, I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I was having a hard time with this because I think there were more that I disliked than those that I liked. But when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, I knew I was going to dislike a lot of them because they're short stories. I do not genuinely like short stories. Comparing this to other short stories, I enjoyed them a lot more. Up next, I read Neon Gods, and this one wasn't bad, but it left me with a lot of questions. I think that the author of Neon Gods needs to meet up with Robert Jordan, who I know he's dead. I know he has passed. I hope he's peaceful wherever he is. But he has too much world building and this author had no world building. So like, I'd like to find a nice medium between the two of them. So Neon Gods is a Hades and Persephone contemporary dark fantasy romance retelling, and it's about Persephone, who has just been put into an arranged marriage with Zeus, and she trying to escape him, she crosses over into the lower city, which is owned by Hades, but everyone believes that Hades is dead, and so she starts up a like almost fake but not quite fake whirlwind romance with him to try to prove like to Zeus that she's ruined herself so that he won't want her. And they have, I want to say it's like 3 months together. I thought it was going to be 6 because I thought Persephone lived 6 months and 6 months. But by the end, they explain that whole entire thing. So they have 3 months together where they are going to try to like keep her protected from Zeus until she turns a certain age. This book was fun. This book was enjoyable. I got through it really fast, but I have so many freaking questions. So many questions. And not even like normal questions that I would have for a book. Like, if you genuinely know any of these answers for this book, like, please leave the comments down below. So first off, where's Olympus in this world? They're in Olympus. The upper and lower city is Olympus. But they talk about, like, Los Angeles and they talk about other Earth cities. But they never mention, like, if Olympus is on Earth or not. Or, like, if it's in the heavens. If, like, humans can get to it or not. I don't understand. Like, I don't know if there are humans walking around in Olympus. There are people walking around in Olympus. Are they lower gods or are they higher gods? And then with that, I know that, like, there are the 13. And then, obviously, there are, like, other gods. Because, like, Persephone and some of the other, like, children have been mentioned in this book, but like what is distinguishing them from each other? Because like none of the gods have powers or abilities. Like Zeus can't control lightning. Hades isn't like the protector of the dead. So like what is the difference between an upper god, a lower god, and a human? Like what is the difference? What can they do? Do they live longer? I don't know. The author never explained it. And then so one of our characters dies and they're mentioned that they're going to go to the underworld. So Hades isn't the god of the underworld because that character was going to go to the underworld, but they weren't going to go to Hades. So I'm confused by that. So is there like a hell in this world? Like when they die, do they go to hell? And is there Satan? Is it like Christianity based? Why are the Greeks practicing Christianity? Why are the Greek gods practicing some type of afterlife that has nothing to do with the Greek gods controlling it? I have more questions than just this, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm so confused about this book. There is a sequel. I'm gonna be reading the sequel. It was a fun book. It definitely was new adult, very smutty. I didn't think it was like anything crazy out there, especially for how it had been pitched to me, but I thought it was fun. And I really liked how caring and protective, not protective, but like how well Hades took care of Persephone. He like genuinely did a good job. And normally I'm not a fan of love interests, of how men treat their women in romances, but I feel like Hades did a really good job because he respected and cared for Persephone and was not jealous of her and genuinely cared about her and wasn't doing that like overbearing protective maleness where he couldn't take care of her. But like I don't know. I had a long chat with my friend about the difference between Hades and like every other male love interest that I've ever read, and there was a huge difference, and I really appreciated the author for having that difference. I rated it a 2.5. Really enjoyable. I would probably recommend people read it, but not if you're wanting answers. Up next, I read The House of Always, which is the 4th book in the, I keep saying the Ruin of Kings series. It's the Chorus of Dragons series. So this is the 4th book out of 5. The 5th one just got released like last week. I ended up rating this book 4 stars. I rated book 1 and 2. Well, I rated book 1 a 5-star. I rated book 2 a 4.5 star. I rated book 3 a 3-star, and I'm rating this one a 4-star. I actually really enjoyed it. This book is kind of the explanation for certain characters that are in book 1 but aren't in book 2 or 3. It explains a lot of what they were doing during those books. Yes, this book was a lot of filler and didn't really progress the plot of the overarching series at all. But I really enjoyed being with those characters again and seeing what they were doing. And a lot of the characters that were in this were my favorites. So I'm so glad we returned to them, because book 3 like really disappointed me. It's a high epic, very queer fantasy series, mostly following Kieran. He, in book 1, is the bastard child of this royal family. And in book 1, you're following 2 different POVs. Him as an adult in a jail cell being interviewed, and he's telling the story of his life from when he got captured as a slave and was sold off to this like assassin brotherhood. And then his warden, who is telling the story of Kieran's childhood, of how he got found by the royal family and brought back into their line. And there are dragons and there's magic, and there are lots of different kinds of magical races, and it's really enjoyable. Just some slight issues with some of the things that are happening. Up next, I read Bunny by Mona Awad, and this one has been going around recently on Book Talk. I mean, it's been out for a while and people have been talking about it for a while, but for whatever reason recently I've been seeing it a lot pop up on people's channels. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and in my personal opinion, I think that Mona Awad just like missed the mark slightly. I think she did a really good job. I liked what she said and I liked what she did, and I liked how weird the book was, but I personally would have liked a little bit more direction. And I know that a lot of people love this book because of its lack of direction and its lack of focus and its lack of explanation. But for my personal preferences, now I know I like just a little bit more. So it is a really weird book about these 4 young women who are in this academic setting, and we are following one girl who is in this academic setting with them. And those 4 girls call each other Bunny, and they're very femme, very much ignored by a lot of their peers for being females. And our main character, even herself, like kind of dislikes them, but she gets invited over to a party that they're hosting one night, and she decides to go because they're basically the only women in their department together, and she decides to meld some bonds with them. And that leads into a very weird, I don't even know if friendship is the right word, to be honest, but it takes her down the path of the bunnies and making things really weird and really difficult and really strange in her life. So lots of unexplained, lots of weirdness, lots of connections to other stories, which I really enjoyed. There are multiple references to Alice in Wonderland and Jonah and the Whale from the Bible. And there are other things referenced too, of course, but I feel like they were referenced without actually having any connection to those stories. It didn't make sense to me why we're referencing all of these things without, like multiple times referencing these things without having some greater connection. And maybe I'm missing something. To be completely honest, I could be missing something. I one day would like to reread this book because it feels like something that you need to read a few times to like fully digest. But for the first read, I rated it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. And up next, I have 2 more books to talk about. Both of them were from my May TBR though, so I finished up everything I needed to read for Magical Readathon, and I had already done my rules for TBRopoly for May, so I decided just to start reading books off of that. And both of them are arcs as well. So the first one is The Island, and I didn't love this one. So it is about this family who goes to Australia for work reasons. They're only visiting a dad, a stepmom, and 2 kids, and the stepmom is like a lot younger, and their previous mom had like died really recently, and the father remarried really quickly. So the kids have a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and they're basically like heavily drugged by the father. Anyways, I don't need to get into all of this. And when they're there, the kids like want to see some wildlife, and so they go off on this trip to this little island where they're told they're going to be able to see koala bears, and while they're there, an accident happens and they try to leave the scene of the crime, and then this weird family on the island stops them and starts hunting them for sport. The book like tries to play with your concept of what's going on and who's in charge and what actually is happening and who's lying and who's not, but I feel like it did a really terrible job of that. It also did a really terrible job of having any twists or turns. I saw all of them coming, and like I think most people would see them coming. I also really hated all of the characters. Like, they were insufferable. And like I said, I can get behind insufferable characters, but these ones were not done well. They were not well-rounded characters who I cared about or enjoyed. So like, while they're being hunted for sport, I'm like, heck yeah, hunt them for sport. I also feel like a lot of the book was black and white, so there were obvious bad guys and obvious good guys, and the bad guys were obviously bad because they had no redeeming qualities, and the good guys were obviously good because they're being hunted for sport, and why else wouldn't you be good unless you're being hunted for sport? Every decision they made was like slowly worse and worse and worse, and like so lacking in humanity that they didn't feel like real people who would have ever existed in a society. It didn't make sense to me. I feel like it wrapped up like weird and I didn't love it, but I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. I think this one comes out either in May or June. The author is like a very famous author. I've never read him before, to be honest, but he has a lot of other bestsellers out there, lots of other thriller mysteries. Other people responded really well to this book, so maybe you would like it, and maybe it's just me, because let's be real, I've been rating books poorly for a while now. And then finally, the last book on this list is Sometime in Summer by Katrina Leno. I've read quite a few other Katrina Leno books. I really like her writing. I really like how easy her writing style is. It, for whatever reason, like seems to match up perfectly with how I think, so I can get through her books like so quickly. Sometime in Summer is closest to her other book, which is Summer of Salt. I would not compare it to some of her other books like Horrid or You Must Not Miss. It's definitely more of a like summer teen movie. There is a romance, but it's not with the main character, it's with some side characters, and like a lot of the story follows these two side characters like getting together, but the romance is really not the main focus of the book. And so we're following our main character, Anna. She believes that she's being plagued by bad luck because her best friend and her got into a horrible fight and are no longer talking to each other. Her parents are getting a divorce. Her mom is selling the bookshop that she's always owned all of Anna's life. And even though Anna's not a huge fan of reading, that bookshop means a lot to her. And then also her mom can pick out the perfect book for every single person except for Anna. And so Anna just feels like her life is falling apart. And so this summer, Anna's mom and her decide to go back to Anna's mother's hometown because their aunt recently passed and left Anna's mom the cottage. And so they're going to stay in the cottage. They're going to sell everything out of it. They're going to sell it after the end of the summer and just like have a summer away from everything. Anna is there. This comet is passing in the sky. Anna makes some really good friends in the town. And so it is kind of about her healing, and it is a lot about her realizing that she might not have been right in all of her decisions and that she needs to make some effort on her own, that bad luck is kind of an excuse a lot of times, specifically for her to like cover up for bad things happening when she doesn't want to put the work into making them good again. But it's also about a child grieving their parents' divorce, making friends as a teen, a young teen. She's 14, renewing friendships. And it was a really sweet, enjoyable book. Definitely like a coming of age summer fun story. If that's your kind of jam, I recommend it. It's coming out in June, and I ended up rating it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Anyways, that's it. That's all of the books that I read this month. A lot, 13. I mean, it's nowhere near my biggest month, but I feel really good about it. I feel like maybe, even though this was my lowest average rated month, I feel like maybe I'm looking into a good month coming, hopefully, fingers crossed, please, and thank you. Let me know how your month went with reading, how you're feeling, how you're doing, what's going on in your life. I appreciate each and every one of you. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye.